Transmedia, just a T.
Lecturer Radha O'Meara, welcome.
Thank you.
Could you introduce yourself, please?
My name's Radha O'Meara. I'm lecturer in screenwriting at the University of Melbourne in Australia. I mostly teach screenwriting, but I also do research in film studies, in television studies, in screenwriting, and a little bit in areas like gender studies.
Have you said you are from Australia?
I am from Australia originally, and I've done most of my study in Australia, but I've also studied in other places, and I also taught for 3 years in New Zealand.
But right now you are not in Australia.
Right now I am at a conference in Spain.
Spain.
And it's on television aesthetics, and it's a wonderful conference, and it's been a wonderful excuse to come to Spain because I had never been to Spain before, and I have now had the opportunity to see beautiful places and meet fabulous people and eat delicious food.
Close to the coast.
Yes.
In Gandia.
Yes. Yeah, it's a wonderful location.
And cloudy maybe?
Cloudy.
Yeah, it's cloudy today?
Yeah, it is, but the weather, I've been here a week and it hasn't rained yet. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Well, in Transmedia, we like to play. I'm going to offer you a sound, if you identify it.
I can't identify it.
You can't identify it?
No, it's familiar. I know it.
Continue.
But I don't know who sings it. Ah, yep. Yep.
Do you identify it?
Yeah, from Orange is the New Black.
Orange is the New Black. And what is Orange is the New Black?
Orange is the New Black is a really interesting TV show. I have actually only watched the first 2 seasons of it. I do really like it because it's an interesting mix of comedy and drama. And I also like it because it's in a tradition of a lot of other TV shows about women's prisons. I mean, there are a lot of interesting TV shows that are set in prisons anyway. But there seems to be quite a preponderance of TV shows set in women's prisons, which I find kind of interesting because actually across the world there are so many more men in prison than there are women in prison, but somehow the idea of a women's prison captures the audience's imagination. But it's also, I'm particularly interested in, there's an Australian TV show called Wentworth that's very popular at the moment, and then that I'm researching as well. And it's based, it's a kind of reboot from an Australian 80s TV show called Prisoner. They're both set in women's prisons, and one of the reasons that those shows have been quite successful is because they're actually very cheap to make. You don't need many sets. You have
outdoors locations.
Yeah, you don't need lots of outdoor locations. You can have like 1 or 2 rooms and 1 or 2 corridors, and that's the whole thing. And you've got a constant reason for characters coming and going. Mm-hmm. There's always a narrative convenience of, oh, there's a new character that's just been jailed for something. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's somebody's due for release. There's the constant coming and going of characters that's kind of ideal for generating and regenerating narrative.
In fact, I don't know if you agree, maybe the least interesting part in this kind of series are the flashbacks.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true.
Slow down the rhythm of
Yes. Yeah. So So Wentworth and Is the New Black both do flashbacks to characters' experiences before they were incarcerated. And it does kind of take the narrative drive away, the narrative drive of what's happening in the present and what's happening in the prison. It does give you a sense of background and depth about the characters, but there is a sense in which it kind of slows that narrative drive of what's happening right now.
What is a showrunner?
A showrunner?
Yeah.
I am pretty interested in that question because it seems to be an American model that has developed in the last, maybe 20 years, particularly with the rise of so-called quality TV that focuses a lot on authorship, particularly authorship as a kind of marketing discourse. And so the marketing discourse constructs the showrunner as a kind of peak author of the text. And I think in a lot of ways it is sort of a marketing tool rather than an actuality, but it also is an actual term that is used in industry. One of the things I find really interesting is that in the Australian context, there haven't been showrunners very much at all. That term hasn't been used much at all, but there's a recent show that was a kind of high-end TV drama. It's set in Tasmania, and it's a kind of cop drama, but there's a kind of supernatural elements as well. And it was created by a woman called Vicky Madden, and she was the first one in Australia to call herself a showrunner, which I thought was really interesting, partly because she used that term because she had a lot of experience, many years experience working in the British TV industry and had worked as a showrunner in the British TV industry. So partly she was taking the kind of industrial hierarchy and model from what she had worked within in the British industry and saying, that's how I want to work in the Australian industry. But it's also really interesting because I thought in terms of gender that she wasn't saying I'm gonna run a TV show how almost all TV shows in Australia are run, and almost all TV shows in Australia are run by men. So she was setting herself up as, I'm a showrunner, so that's a different title that no one else in this country has used before, and I'm going to do things in a kind of different way. So I found that really interesting.
You are a humor expert. The goal of the humor should be smiles, produce smiles, loved, to be in the end in a good mood. What is the most proper? Because maybe sometimes we consider that a smile is more intelligent than a laugh, or not.
I do think that's a good question. I wouldn't call myself a humor expert at all. I would say that mostly I do television studies.
But you are smiling all the time.
Yeah. and I do like watching television comedy, and I do think that there is a lot more work on television drama than there is on comedy, and that's kind of interesting from a scholarly perspective. Most of the definitions of comedy are that it should elicit or aim to elicit laughter. So it is about that effective response in the audience. And some of that is about intention. It may not even be successful. But it is interesting that you don't necessarily have to sit on your couch in your lounge room laughing out loud constantly at a TV show. In fact, a lot of people will kind of enjoy a comedy without even laughing out loud at all. But they will still appreciate the humor.
Well, we are finishing this tea. Many people say that people who don't have a sense of humor are dangerous. Series or films that don't have a pinch of humor are dangerous for our mood, or because in the classical cinema, in the classical films, it doesn't matter the genre. It always the films have a little part, a little pinch of humor, of a smile. But now maybe we are very, very serious in dramas. And what do you think about that?
I think there are some dramas that are very serious, but I think there are a lot of very serious dramas that use comedy in interesting ways. Like The Sopranos is a really dark show that really uses a lot of comedy.
But political correctness have destroyed a lot of possibilities. Maybe it's necessary to respect different diversity. Yeah. But for humor it's more difficult.
Yeah. Like Hannibal, I find is a really dark show, but there are moments of kind of humor in it, but it's a really dark humor. And I think in some ways that dark humor is more devastating, and it can open up topics, but also thoughts that are maybe not so accessible in more logical ways. Just that idea that affect and emotion can open up ways of knowing and being that are different to kind of logical thought.
Transmedia, just a T. Esteban Galán.
Would you like to remind people who have helped you in your career?
Would I like to thank people who've helped me? Oh, wow, there's so many.
Reference or...
Yeah, there's so many. I would say that that one of the great inspirations is Professor Angela Dalianis. She was my PhD supervisor, but I also remember having her as my lecturer when I was in first year cinema studies, and she's a fabulous academic because she's an inspirational teacher. She's so invested and interested in her topic, but she treats it still very rigorously, but not seriously. She brings humor to it, but and enjoyment, great enjoyment, but rigor at the same time. And I think that she's a wonderful model of how to be rigorous without being just constantly serious. Yeah.
One film.
Yeah.
One film, please give us a present. One film. So that it's special for you, it's inspiring.
Wow, that's hard. I love so many films. I'm going to say Best in Show. It's a comedy that is a mock documentary that's about a competition around dogs, kind of who's the best dog in America kind of show. And I love it. It's one of those... It's like comfort food, when you're feeling a bit down or a bit grubby or you've had a hard day. I can always put that on and it will always make me laugh. So it's something I have watched many, many times, but it will always make me laugh. And part of that is the great characters in it, and part of that is the dogs in it. I do like dogs, and I find them pretty funny and entertaining. So the kind of interaction between the characters and the dogs. But I'm also super interested in it as a screenwriter because it's actually a film that wasn't really written. It was it was developed through a process of devising that is more something we often associate more with theatre. So rehearsal and just developing through performance. So as somebody who's a screenwriter and somebody who teaches screenwriting, I actually find it awesome that there are other modes of production, that it doesn't always have to rely on a script. And there are other wonderful ways of making brilliant films that don't need a script at all. But they really can produce a film that's excellent and that has that really strong effect that makes me laugh, even though I've seen it dozens of times, but has that kind of non-conventional way that we think about bringing something to the screen.
A book?
A book?
Yeah.
That I love? Oh, wow. Gosh.
It's not easy.
Pardon?
It's not easy.
No, it's not. Yeah, I'm struggling between kind of fiction and academic stuff.
Inspiring.
Yeah.
It could be sometimes fiction, it could be academic.
Yeah.
Maybe both, too.
Yeah.
If you want to.
Oh my God, that's really hard.
Maybe it's the moment when you read it, not the quality many times.
Yeah. Book. I actually, I really love the works of Tolstoy, like Anna Karenina, or War and Peace. And I really got into reading those when I was an undergraduate, partly because I also really love soap opera, and I had envisioned that they were kind of great literature, and then when I actually read them, I really related to them in the same way that I relate to soap opera, that there are these really intense and complex character relationships that shift in minute ways over a very long period of time, and there's a lot of melodrama in them, you know?
It's because Tolstoy that you then changed to humor? Maybe because there is no humor in Tolstoy.
Yeah. There's not
very
a lot.
Serious.
It is very serious. It is very serious. But there's not a lot of humor and a lot of soap opera, and I love that still. If you're going to do emotion, do emotion. If you're going to do humor, do humor. It's okay to do one or the other if you're good at it, like Tolstoy is. You know. Yeah.
We have finished. It's possible to be happy doing research.
Absolutely, it's possible to be happy doing research. I don't think you should do research if you're not happy doing it. There are other jobs in the world you can do.
Yeah.
So
it has been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Esteban.
Transmedia, just a tea.